And we smoothly goes forward with Max song, and he's talking about really climate change, inevitability, and the way we are able to act. Max, go ahead. I see you are here.
Yeah, thank you so much, and really appreciate the previous panelists for setting the stage for us. We're very excited to actually join with you today to have an amazing panel to talk through the various parameters of climate change. So just to introduce our wonderful panelists, I made this, this slide. I'll share screen with you guys right now. Let me know if you see this. So basically over the next hour and a half, we basically have 7 talented speakers, also Desmond speaking, and unfortunately he's not on this page right now. We are going to cover 3 dimensions of this topic. The first is actually around the business, and also how do businesses react to the need for better reporting, better governance, and better sustainability practices in their business. And then second is going to be a section around technologies and new developments. How do we actually use exciting new capabilities that didn't exist previously to actually maybe help us participate or act in this climate problem. And then finally, we're going to have a section on international perspectives. So thinking through, different parts around the world, how are they dealing with the climate problem? What are lessons, challenges, and insights for us to use? So before we start, I just want to briefly go through a few things to set the stage, and then we're going to turn it over to our first panelist, which is going to feature Tiwei, Evgeny, and then a bit of myself, although I'll sort of put my part into the introduction, so leave more space for the panelists. And then during new technologies, we'll have Andy and Bill. And I think Desmond actually is speaking also in the first section here. And finally, we'll have international regulation and also perspectives, and we have Ojas and Miroslav. So what are we talking about when we think about climate change? The first thing is really just to take a longer term perspective at where we are as a species and also as a civilization. So this is a picture from NASA over the last almost 800,000 years. And we can see just tracking over the parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere, we've really are living in pretty unprecedented circumstances, at least in the last 1 million years or so. And although there's been cyclic patterns of carbon increases and decreases in the atmosphere, I think that industrialization and human activity have really dramatically changed the curve, so to speak. So I would say that it's not really so much that we're living in a process of climate change per se. I think we're actually living much more in a climate emergency. There is a huge amount of damage that has already been done to the Earth over the last 50 years or so. And we continue to emit huge amounts of CO2 as we speak. And so one relatively alarming estimate is that over the next 7 years and 7 months or so, we will actually have completely exhausted the 1.5 degree carbon budget that was one of the targets during the Paris Agreement. And just give you a sense of scale for where we are and how much dramatic action we need to take, and I think all the panelists are going to speak to this point after me. The blue line here really is the current policy scenario, which is this is what happens if we don't do, if we actually do what we've set out to say we've done. And then the gray line actually is if we have no policies in place at all. And we can see that actually the current policy scenario is actually, there's a huge deviation between that and where we need to go. And so these 2 pathways here, the 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees, show the amount of dramatic decreases in CO2 we need to have in the atmosphere over the next 10 years. So I'd say that these challenges are pretty dramatic and require a lot of innovation for us. And I just want to sort of set the stage a little bit, and some of the other panelists are going to speak to this more in detail as well. There's actually this idea of a carbon emission market, which is actually a way to quantify and calculate how much CO2 is in the atmosphere, and whether or not we can have companies and individuals be responsible for offsetting that. And so here's a global map of places where different parts of the world have already started to consider or think through the issuance, the creation of a carbon market. And we can see that we're doing not terribly. There's a decent coverage here, but the places that are dark blue actually are quite limited. It's mostly just Europe right here. Dark blue is based, and there's actually an existing market in place The green is kind of where things are in planning stages. And just give you a sense of scale of where we're going to look to in the near future. The two largest carbon markets today are the ones that are state level in the United States and also the European Union. And collectively, they add up to about 2 billion tons of CO2 or so. If we go back to the previous slides, in order to actually have meaningful impact, we need to reduce the total amount of emissions by 15 to 30 billion tons on a yearly basis. So I think we're still pretty far away. And the one interesting piece of news that's happening recently is that we actually are going to see the emergence of a huge carbon market in mainland China. And once actually becomes online, it will actually become instantaneously twice the size of the existing European market. And so that's kind of a place where China has both taken leadership for climate issues and also has something that's contributed to these climate issues. So having said that, I want to introduce our first stage of panelists. We have Evgeny and also Tsiwei. And I believe, Desmond, you're going to be part of our first group as well. Is that correct? We can figure that piece out. So let's have each of you guys share a little bit about your backgrounds, and then we'll have each of you guys have a chance to spend 10 minutes or so sharing a particular perspective on how do we see the business impacts of sustainability in your fields.
Mm-hmm. So,
Tsiwei, do you want to go first?
I can start?
Yeah, sure.
Or, okay, say yeah. No, please.
No worries. Okay, I'll just quickly. So this is Ziwei. I'm with a law firm based in Hong Kong. Thank you, Max, for inviting me. We are a law firm that works closely with investment funds and other financial service providers in Hong Kong. But increasingly, we are moving towards working more closely with ESG and ESG-minded and impact investors, as we are ourselves a believer in sustainable finance and the need to move more capital towards climate solutions and other solutions that have positive environmental and social impact. So that's me.
Yeah, Evgeny, you want to go?
My name is Evgeny. Management, which I brief country, GR and.
Evgeny,
hey,
please.
Evgeny, the microphone's
yes.
It's challenging. We can't hear you very well. Can you speak more into the microphone?
So actually, I represent Positive Dialogue management company, which is more about GR, bridging gap between countries. And IXD Capital is a venture builder, is an impact investment evangelist, connecting impact investors with the sustainable startups around the globe. We create this whole ecosystem. We have a number of projects, infrastructure projects and venture projects. I would be happy just to also to enlighten on the topic of 17 SDGs and the global initiatives that are crucial to achieving the goal that was just mentioned, to achieving this 1.5 degrees, the maximum increase of temperature. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just setting the stage and asking, maybe Tsiwei, first question for you, like, how do you see the needs and awarenesses of these businesses as they approach ESG? Like, do you think that there's actually been an increase in awareness and also in consideration for their business models and also their corporate governance, since we started talking about climate change?
Sure. So I have prepared some slides, so maybe I will share my screen. And given my background, I will be mostly speaking from the investors' sustainable finance perspective. Yeah. Let me try. This is my first time sharing a screen on Zoom, so hopefully it works. Can you see?
Yeah.
How do I wait a second. All right, well, can I, okay.
You can go enter full screen.
Okay, great. So, yeah. So I would like to start with a quote I got from the blockchain news website. Coronavirus might be the biggest story of the decade. Climate change will be the grand narrative of the century. The first question that came to my mind actually when I was preparing for this was, will COVID slow down climate finance, climate action, or speed it up? As you can see, I have got a few headlines here from the past 2 months, and there seems to be quite some split views. Like you see, will COVID-19 derail climate finance? With the concerns that countries now would be more focused on economic recovery and therefore perhaps slow down their investment into the transition towards a low carbon economy. But at the same time, you also see headlines which shows that in order to build back better, this is the time to invest in a sustainable economic recovery, because a recovery that doesn't take care of both planet and people will not be resilient. So as a Suxfin believer, we are glad to see in recent weeks there are more data coming out now, whether it's from MSCI, from S&P, from HSBC, that ESG-focused companies or funds or indexes are outperforming their mainstream market counterparts. Of course, such data is not conclusive, it's only a few months in, but like many other Suxfin advocates, we do hope that COVID-19 would be a crisis that shows that Suxfin can really make a difference. So maybe it's helpful to explain a little bit what is sustainable finance, because we're talking about climate here. But a lot of the investors who care about climate would see themselves as part of a bigger group, the sustainable finance investors. And you can see the sustainable investing here covers quite a lot of different strategies. From exclusions to ESG integration to impact investing. And what's the size we are talking about here? Pre-COVID, the figure of sustainable investing assets under management at the beginning of 2018 is US dollars 30.7 trillion. And it is a 34% jump from 2 years ago, 2 years before. And it was definitely a growing market. And another helpful figure would be from the UNPRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment, which sees the signatories reaching over 3,000 right now, covering many of the major asset owners and investment managers and service providers around the world. So why? There a lot of analysts have been looking at what are the drivers behind the growth in sustainable finance, and definitely the increased amount of people who believe in climate emergency, as Max already set out, are increasing, creating the consumer demand as well as the investor demand. But regulations also play a very key role, and some of the regulatory trends that we are seeing I would summarize them as three. One of them, the first one is that increasingly, definitely we are seeing more stringent ESG regulations around the world, but when it comes to the environmental aspect of ESG disclosure, we're definitely seeing it becoming more mandatory towards from voluntary towards mandatory. And that is the case in China, where environmental disclosure has been made mandatory this year. And another trend is that we are seeing ESG disclosure moving more from a check the box exercise to really asking companies to look at the materiality of ESG factors, including climate. And so this would really then help the company assess what are the ESG risks they're exposed to, as well as the opportunities. And this would also help investors assess these companies. And the third trend is a standardization trend. There are many different standards and frameworks out there, but increasingly we are seeing efforts to move towards creating more common framework so that this could help us better avoid and reduce greenwashing or ESG washing or rainbow washing, which are the SDGs that there are many different types of washing out there, but yeah, so standardization another trend that we are seeing, and this would include efforts like TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and also the EU taxonomy, which I'll go into a little bit. So just quickly, Hong Kong, there have been quite a number of regulatory actions in the last 2 years, but one of them would be the updated ESG guide that would come into effect in July. And now companies would have to disclose an additional aspect in relation to climate change. And they are also, is a comply or explain requirement. And they have to disclose, they have to identify the climate-related issues which have impacted them or which may impact, and also share the actions that they have taken to manage them. As I mentioned, there have been quite a lot of actions in the past 3 years in Hong Kong. The ESG guide is just one of them. Another is Hong Kong issuing the biggest sovereign green bond at US 1 billion last May, and also the requirements that SFC has issued for green or ESG funds in Hong Kong. So the list is growing, and we hope to see more concrete actions taken. At the international level, I mentioned the TCFD, the Task Force of Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So this is a framework that is already endorsed by over 36 central banks around the world, and over 800 public and private sector supporters and investors with nearly 34 trillion in AUM that are supporting this recommendation. This is an effort to standardize climate-related financial disclosures, and as we see this growing group of supporters, central banks, public actors around the world, we are really hoping that this would create some standardization for at least the climate disclosure. And I would like to emphasize that the TCFD does not only cover climate-related risks, but also opportunities. And then finally, just quickly on the, yes.
Maybe 1 minute left.
Yeah, sure. EU taxonomy. I'm not going to go into detail, but this is another effort to create some common performance threshold so that it would be easier for investors and companies to really identify what are the economic activities that are considered green. So this is arguably one of the most important moves in sustainable finance recently. Okay, so then before I end, I just want to quickly also emphasize that if you look at green bond proceeds, it has, or investment in climate, a lot of it has gone into climate mitigation. And so there has been a call now for more investment to go into climate adaptation, resilience, and just a figure, the green bond proceeds as of 2018, as shared by Climate Bonds Initiative, only 3.3 to 5% went into climate adaptation. So definitely for investors and solution providers, this is one area to think about. And lastly, I want to also cover the concept of just transition, because as we think about climate, we often think about it as an environmental issue. It is, but it is also very much about the people, about migration, about labor standards, about human rights. So as solution providers also do think about the social aspects of climate transition. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. We're going to have a bit of space at the end for discussions in a bit. So hopefully there'll be a chance to share, interact with your thoughts a bit more. I want to give Evgeny the floor now. And Evgeny, I'm trying to limit you to about 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to actually have Desmond go after you.
Yeah, I would like just to say that Tsuwei made a great point that it's all about ESG alignment. Yeah, we just would like to talk more about, roots. About roots of ESG. It all started with sustainable development goals. Yeah, 1 minute. Let's give full screen mode. You can see my screen. So I would like just to tell about the technologies, about how SDGs is important in implementing emerging and cutting-edge technologies and deploying it, and how it can actually help us reduce carbon footprint production. So it first started with the Global Agenda 2030. Prior to that, I would just like to mention that there were Millennium Goals, and the whole discussion around the climate change. It is going on for more than at least 30 years, on a world scale. But the whole concept created, and the point was made that we need just to have a complex concept that would encompasses all industries and all processes in order to make a difference. So SDGs framework was first, proposed in 2015, but it was, the resolution was signed and adopted in the year of 2017. So there are like 17 SDGs. It encompasses all industries. And I would just like to mention that there are some industries that can be and must be excluded, like arms industry, narcotics industry, and gambling industry. But apart from it, even oil and gas, mineral industries, they make a great point in terms of energy production, but there should be some adjustments made in order to decrease the carbon footprint. And fintech industry, it has been also mentioned, makes a great contribution to upholding and empowering communities in emerging countries. So I would just like to make a point that 17 SDGs shouldn't be perceived as some, like a fancy concept created by the bureaucrats in the UN for the next generation of bureaucrats. It should be perceived on a world scale by governments, corporates, and individuals as well. It's all about, our level of awareness of this problem. And I've agreed with Wei that, there should be a common taxonomy, a common alignment in terms of SDGs and ESG factors. So recently, Paris Agreement was signed, but as Tony Verb also mentioned, it's all about geopolitics. Unfortunately, some countries hasn't signed it so far, but without without our countries being united in a common spirit, without common understanding, everything we are talking about is really hard to implement. So we should all take an example of Europe, because they're doing really great job in terms of green bonds, in terms of making a real contribution. When we talk about the UN initiatives, there was also the SBT initiative. So that was created in collaboration with leading organizations. So it helps actually corporates to align their actions with the present day climatology perspective and the Paris Agreement, and enhancing at the same time their competitive advantage in the process of transitioning to low carbon economy. So there are plenty of industries, but I would like to make a close, a deep. I would like to pay your attention on water, energy, and waste management sectors. We have to introduce new technologies and and to shift to a next level. There are like upstream and downstream activities in plenty of industries. So I would just like to show you, this cycle example of the industry, how it actually works. For example, we have cellulose fibers. So it starts from, like raw materials and down to, and we have like several stages till distribution. And at every stage, it is important to perceive, it is important to consider various points. For example, production, how it is produced, from which materials, what's the minimum wage of employees that are working in any production facilities, and how it's actually distributed. And it's in every industry, it makes sense. It's like, this general concept, and there are plenty of aspects that should be taken into account. you know, a lot of brands, a lot of corporates make difference. I really hope, you know, that we will shift to next concept of PR and marketing in terms of SDGs, when corporations will pay much attention to enlighten the public on their production cycle, what kind of what kind of raw materials they use, what kind of salary they pay to their employees, and how it actually distributed. What's, you know, the general impact of each industry, of each company to achieving sustainable development goals. So yeah, for example, in terms of distribution, there is a Levis Wealth Thread, H&M Living Wage Pledge initiatives, and there are plenty of more. So now you witness a new shift, but eventually, yeah, eventually it concerns each of us. I mean, like when literally everybody and anybody, you know, living well-being in a country, in any country, when a person starts to perceive it as something that is really significant and crucial, when we start thinking about what kind of, for example, clothes we wear, what kind of food we consume. So that's when, you know, a change will start. That's when we can really achieve this hairy audacious goal, when we can achieve, you know, the maximum increase of only 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Evgeny, for sharing that. And please stay tuned for a little bit of discussion as well. So Desmond, love to have you give you the floor and have you introduce yourself and share your perspectives on this panel as well.
Okay, great. Hi there, Desmond Marshall here from Hooge International and Hooge Ventures. What we do is actually we're working anything on sustainability innovations. So basically from advisory down to we have our own accelerator, and we also have our own farms as well. So we can say that we also own one of the world's largest database called Futures, in terms of focusing solely on sustainability innovations. So I guess I won't take too long. We're just going straight into what we should be saying into this topic around here. If we talk about the exact timing, like 2 years ago, when people talk about like climate change or sustainability, we still think, or even the businesses are still thinking that these are just charity. These are just goodwill stuff. It's nothing new. It's nothing important. But then again, the world burnt up. Australia got fires around here. Paris Agreement happened. And then there's COVID-19 as well. Of course, people are still speculating and saying, okay, this is man-made, or whether this is something that relates to climate change. I don't want to go into that discussion around here. But then again, there's also other things in terms of other manufacturing or seafood kind of related kind of things. So there's a lot, you may not know that there's actually a new virus in seafood, in shrimp farming as well. That also happened in China, and then it's now spreading out to other places as well. There's a new strain of virus that's going on in horses as well. So yeah, all shit is going loose right now around these days around here. So when we talk about whether we should incorporate this into a business model, 2 years ago, people don't really care about this. So it's like, hey, from an investor point of view, we look at this from a VC point of view. So it's like a good to have thing. But then again, right now, when we're talking to many of the investors, it's more like these are the things that has actual returns coming in. So when you're investing in a company, a sustainable innovation company, well, a lot of you now heard about Beyond Meat. So what are these? Alternative proteins. These are things that is actually getting a really good, huge return. Because of COVID-19, there's a lot of new innovation companies that are sprouting up and getting a lot more attention in terms of these areas. And that's where we're focused in terms of sustainability innovation. So like I said, we have our own farms as well. So agri-tech, air, wind power, all these things, alternative proteins, this is on our radar. And many people don't even know as well, when we talk about something that's close to climate change, Thailand and Southeast Asia is having droughts. That is unprecedented before as well. So the farmers, the rice farmers couldn't be growing rice for at least more than nearly close to a year already. So Indonesia is talking about food famine at this point around here. So whether this should be incorporated into the business model, yes, in a way, but I would say that climate change is a little bit too vague. When people talk about, hey, how can we do climate change and what kind of innovations around that, people still talk about, hey, can we do carbon offsetting, carbon exchanges, people flying less outside, how can we exchange that and make it into an incentive loyalty program? These are pretty much like kid stuff outside already. So in a way, it should be expanded into a more bigger level called sustainability or sustainability development as well. So in a way, from our investors right now, because of this COVID-19, we are actually looking into, hey, companies being responsible. If you are a old industry, so like in China, like in other countries around here, we see old industries that are being labeled like old, polluted. They are being closed. They are not welcomed at all. Some of my friends do furniture in China. They are being closed off or being evacuated or just pushed over to other outskirts in China. But then again, if you paint the table white and add a thermometer onto the table, you call it a smart office or a smart home kind of a concept. And you get actually a lot of benefits out of that. You get good offices, you get good benefits, you get good tax redemptions as well. So, and everyone looks at you as a poster boy. So, you know, in a way, having the word sustainability and actually doing it is now right now having really good returns coming along here. And we're seeing from an investor point of view that actually even before COVID-19, we're seeing that the increase generically, it was supposed to be like from originally 5% of their portfolio for high net worth individuals or investors, they were going up to 20%. So a jump from 5% to 20%. But now, because of the COVID-19, I would expect that to jump even more higher, like 25 or even 30%. So in a way, if you don't have it in your place, then you're going to get screwed as a business, basically. So back the floor to you, Max.
Thank you, Desmond. Really appreciate those thoughts. So that basically is the wrap for our first section, which is the sort of business climate and ESG section. Next, we actually want to give a chance for two people building very exciting new technology to talk about their current projects. First, we have Andy Un, chairman of Indian Group. And then afterwards, we'll have Bill Kentrup, who's of All Infra. So Andy, over to you.
Hi everyone. I'll share my screen. 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? All right, great. So today I represent Go Impact Capital Partners. It's a new venture of mine, and I started this venture with Helene Lee. She's one of the top advocate around the world on sustainability finance, and also together with Clarence, which is he was the former CEO of BNP Paribas. So what is Go Impact? It is basically an ecosystem that we're building. As all our founders, we believe that impact is not a word. It's all about how we can take action. So everything is not about just simply talking, but taking immediate actions. So with Go Impact, the entire ecosystem, we have 3 pillars. One is called Go Learn. So such a room that we have like-minded people. We might have different things that we want to learn about, the SDGs, all the ESG and SRI, and then we network together. So that's the second pillar. And the third part is actually once we know the knowledge, we know the people, and we can go and impact together. And that's the investment. And we break down the 17 SDGs into 5 user-friendly, easy to understand pillars. So, instead of going into a room and say, hey, there are 17 SDGs and 282 missions, we basically break it down and make it more simple. So during dinner or lunchtime, coffee break, we can all talk about it. And today, I just want to share why I came along with, with all these ventures and what happened. So about 2.5 years ago, I went to Luoyang in China. So I visited an orphanage, which is run by American for 30 years. And at that orphanage, I met the founder. And the founder, he stayed in China 30 years ago. He wants to build the best orphanage for critical illness children. So they're dumped by their parents and they have critical illness. And they use all kinds of ISO 9001, 9002, built a very beautiful orphanage that they support about 200 kids, but they hire 400 staffs. So it's 24/7. And I was so impressed. And during our conversation, he said, well, Andy, I'm so happy today because one of the largest state-owned orphanage, they copied our entire model. And I was so impressed because in such a commercial world, if you copy my idea, I'll actually sue you. But he built the entire blueprint for someone to copy them. So that was the initial, the wow factor. I was like, wow, someone is actually spending 30 years to build a blueprint so that these state-owned can now help millions of people rather than just 400 of them. And then, about 2 years ago, I met Helene, through a workshop that I've done for the bank, and I was showing this, maybe it's, we were presenting to all the second generation, about how they can make use of the funds, and it was all about a buzzword, back then, the sort of impact investing or sustainability. It's all just a buzzword. So we said, maybe it's time for you to redefine billionaire. Maybe instead of making the next unicorn, maybe it's time for us as entrepreneurs or third generation to think of how we can help 1 billion people. And then we said, there are still 2 billion people around the world with extreme poverty. So back then I was looking at this idea, how we can turn shipping containers into sustainable housing. Because around the world, there are about 24 million containers shipping around all around the world, and 40% of them are dumped. And because nothing is coming back, so it's costly, so they would just dump the containers. So we said, imagine if we can build sustainable homes, with free energy in rural poverty, how would that be, right? And we, build it as Legos, right? So, we sort of like adding solar panels on top, and how about putting in, toilets and kitchen, and we have beds, all these, all the electricities, the things that we have to figure out. So we came out with this blueprint. So it was only an idea at the very beginning. And then about half a year later, we sort of, okay, let's take action, let's build it. So I went to Shanghai, I bought 22 containers. It was sitting there. I went to the Hong Kong government, but no one, really interested about this. So we went to Ho Chi Minh City, and the government, they really liked the idea. We talk about how we can use technology to uplift farmers, uplift people in the rural poverty. So that was the beginning of the story. And this is the insight, how the container looks like at the very beginning. And then we sort of say it's too small. So it's only 160 square feet per container. And then we said, but well, it's bigger than those apartments in Hong Kong, right? It's, about 110 to 25 square feet if you look into, Wan Chai area. So we said, what about we combine 4 containers together and build a little home, and we add solar panel on top. And then we can cover the solar, on top. That was all the initial idea. We put things together. And then slowly we renovated inside. And then we built a nice washroom, and then finally, early last year, early 2019, myself and partner, we shipped a container to Ho Chi Minh City, And then we start to, put them together, and we say, okay, we need to build a sort of foundation. We got a piece of land by the science park of Ho Chi Minh City. And then slowly, one by one, we combine them all together. And then this is the final product. We built it. It's a blueprint. And then we said, well, it's not enough. Now we have the home, but what about the food, right? So we said we need some sort of sustainable agriculture. So together with this scientist, Dr. Shi, he built this in his lab. And I said, what is it? And he said, it's actually, in a hospital, there's sort of a plasma for surgery rooms that they clean the knives. It's like $150,000. So he break it down with all these microwaves and also plasma TV. He created this, and all the water flows through. It kills 99.99% of the bacteria. But it's not for us to drink. It's basically for them to clean all the water and build for the mushrooms. Because if the highest ROI for farmers are actually mushrooms and also wasabi. So, because this produces the fungus, right? So clean water is important. So in 7 days, you open the lid, the mushroom will pop up as big as your face, you cut it out, you close the lid, heal for 7 days, and it pops up again, right? So the ROI is quick and fast. So we built a mushroom lab, and then we also figure out one major problem in rural poverty, why crops could not grow. And we built this app that connects to a Raspberry Pi, and we have realized that it's not about the sun, it's not about the extreme heat, but it's about the water temperature that the crop absorbed at that particular moment. So through this, we have built the entire farm right beside the house, so now we have figured out the food, we have figured out the clean water, and then, we have all the living. And then to move on, we say, okay, what about universal basic income? Because Mark Zuckerberg talked about the universal UBI for quite a long time. So we said, how can we use solar and sort of technology, crypto technology, and provide basic meal? So let's say if I give you a lunchbox and you eat it and you say, it's yummy, where does it come from? And I would say, oh, it comes from the sun, right? And then, so how we made this happen, we said, okay, now we have the solar, instead of using Bitcoin like proof of work sort of mechanism, we reverse the model. We use proof of capacity. So we use a hot to space. It's like a bingo that we pre-distribute the module, and we ask for, who has a number 66, and let's say Max, you have a number, you raise your hand, and then I'll distribute a token to you. So that was the initial idea, and we work on the POC model. And what we have done is we have built, there are only 6 POC around the world, out of, if you look at coin market cap, and then we said, wow, that's quite interesting. Now we have the sun provides low energy, and then we can do mining. With mining, we can turn into cryptos and fiat, and then we can buy a lunchbox. For us, it doesn't matter, but a formula, the world poverty formula is 1.25 per day, US dollars. If you go below $1, you die, right? So what we're trying to do is, I just want to deduct one, a blueprint, which is if I can deduct 10 cents from that 1.25, that's not our mission. So, we combine all these three things together with living, with farming, with now universal basic income. It's a blueprint. We're working through the project, we learn a lot. And if you look at this is the power plug. One power plug, it connects to this container, which is the same as our home. The container, the shape is the same, but with a different function. And it powers about 8 petabytes of memories or mining power. And then, yeah, that's it. So, we think that, it's a demo, it's a blueprint with technology. We can change the world. We can move the formula. And we believe that everyone in this world should have just like a safe home, like all of us. Yeah, so that's it. So thanks for all your time. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andy. Yeah, thank you. And it's really incredible. I really encourage all the people watching this and other stuff to check this out a bit more and follow up with Andy afterwards. I think the amount of thoughtfulness and innovation he's put into this whole ecosystem is quite remarkable. So thanks, Andy. And then over to you, Bill, as our second speaker.
Right. Thanks for the intro. Really, really good to connect with everybody here. And I think I'm excited to share with you a little bit of what we're up to in the climate space. Bit of background on myself. So I'm based in Hong Kong, been here since 2001, and really been singularly focused on environmental markets since then. So set up one of Asia's first carbon asset managers in early 2000s, very deep in the Kyoto markets. And then since then, for a financial institution, ran an environmental products business out in the region. I will share my screen now. So hopefully everyone can see that. This is just to share a bit about All In for Climate, and I guess how we're looking at the re-emerging environmental markets, and how that sort of intersects with fintech and in particular blockchain. So sorry, I'm just having trouble getting to the, okay, there we go. So first, a bit about what I mean by environmental financial products. These are financial instruments that represent the environmental attributes of assets or actions. So some of the typical ones people are familiar with is a metric ton of CO2 or a megawatt hour of renewable energy, but there are many others. And importantly, there are hundreds of different types of environmental products across local and government global markets and voluntary and compliance regimes. Why are they important? So at least for climate attributes, very critical to the fight against climate change. They provide evidence of environmental impact. They support green ratings. They lead to higher quality financing. And importantly, they are a distinct and valuable source of finance for climate-friendly assets. Now, data tracking is an aspect of these markets that has been, it's sort of been from the very beginning, many decades ago, one of the areas that people have been trying to improve on. And getting that right is critical. And some of the issues that currently exist, indirect provenance of climate data related to these instruments, double counting, and in some cases, quadruple counting of these instruments, long lead times and expense to issue these certificates. And as you can imagine, environmental product markets it's a highly volatile market, and the option value related to delays in issuance is severe. Limited accessibility to the wider population, so it tends to be dominated by governments and corporates, complex intermediary structures, and the standards for collection of data, minting of certificates, retirement, and accounting in these global markets is not unified. So these are some of the issues that various strategies exist out there to try to improve on. Okay. Okay.
I think maybe scrolling would help.
Yeah, no, I got it. I think I got it. So the climate markets is a subset of these markets, and describe it here as a re-emergence. So the Kyoto markets were it's very significant, exciting market, a lot of positive environmental impact, especially across developing nations. In 2019, in some major climate markets, the value of essentially a carbon environmental product has gone up over 5x. And that's sort of in anticipation of some very significant climate market action. So you've got 200 billion size market last year. Paris agreements, a lot of the contributions under Paris agreements kick in 2020. CORSIA, which affects the airlines in 83 nations, starts essentially this year and grows next year. Oil and gas climate initiative, carbon tax regimes, and so on. I've got a little list here of sectors exposed, which is just about everything and growing. So it's maybe easier to sort of list sectors that are not exposed, but importantly, the implications for getting it wrong, compliance costs, penalties, loss of operating licenses, impaired credit ratings, shrinking access to finance. But for those, historically and currently, for groups that get it right and are kind of ahead of the curve on, sort of dealing with climate risk and looking at climate opportunities, a lot of operational efficiency across businesses and assets, monetizing these certificates, improved ESG ratings, better access to finance. And one of these statements I've got here, which we feel fairly convicted about, is that perfecting the collection and reporting of climate data and the retiring and accounting of environmental products is essential to the durability of nations and governments, corporates, and allowing access to the general population into this climate market. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done. So we've created an end-to-end digital environmental financial product solution. It's a full technology suite from creation of digital environmental financial products, including carbon credits, renewable certificates. It involves an exchange, so making those certificates accessible, and permanent records for retirement of those instruments. On the left, little picture of our landing page, but some of the features in there that are built: direct data collection from assets, recording that data from blockchain. This is all sort of standard data that allows you to be confident that an emission reduction, for example, has occurred. Minting of these certificates in digital form, streamlined seller user interface, so onboarding, asset-related information, environmental products made available, peer-to-peer trading, and again, retirement. All of this is sort of permanently recorded on blockchain, which is critical. So, whether it's a government or corporate, it's really critical that people can look back and connect dots directly to whether it's a claim around emission reductions or a claim around renewable energy portfolio targets that they think they've met. It's really important that they can connect the dots back to specific data and a specific asset. So we built it so that there's limited technical expertise required, and creating this sort of way for a wider market to participate, we believe will significantly amplify climate action in the market. This is a simplified schematic of what's happening. So this is all in production and audited. You've got for example, a solar asset, a power meter. That power meter is feeding data into a smart contract in real time. Those smart contracts feed data into digital certificates that are minted periodically, and then those can be bought, traded, transferred, and retired. So that's the kind of high-level depiction of what's going on the site. This is an important aspect. So given we're dealing with a wide range of assets in a wide range of countries owned by corporates or governments, in some cases, the sort of data related to these instruments is sort of comfortably reported publicly by various parties. In some cases, there are sensitivities. So we built a fully public and also a hybrid public and private flow. So on the left, you've got a device feeding up into a public chain, all the relevant data, minting a certificate, and that's auditable, traceable back to that asset. Similarly, on the right, similar sort of process. However, first the data goes up into a private chain. That data is fully recorded on the private chain, and then as the instrument's brought into the public, there's some public data, the data that's available and comfortable to be sort of made available to the public, but then also a link back to the private chain in relation to the other data. So the important aspect there is that in the future, although the data is not widely made public, that data is there, it's traceable, and it can be, whether it's a government or a corporate needing to go back and look at that data on the private chain, there's a route to do that. So just a couple of quick slides to show that, on the platform, there's this sort of style of data reporting. So we've got asset-specific data. So, for example, the type of asset, the type of power it produces, for example, solar power, when it was commissioned, and so forth. Then there's production-specific data. So from this date to that date, how much power was produced, what's the related emission reductions associated with that. And this could be power, this could be heating, cooling, this could be other sorts of efficiency, but in essence, collecting data related to a specific vintage or production period. And then finally, that data gets nested within a series of smart contracts. Just one remark on this vintage overview is that, again, at the site, you'll see that there's meter-specific data, including the meter manufacturer and the model, the serial number. So it's really, truly environmental impact linked back to a specific device at a specific time on a specific asset. And that's really critical. It also allows for those instruments to then have something akin to a common accounting standard as well. So they're all sort of unified in terms of the composition of data that's collected in relation to climate impact. This is just a note to say that there's a blockchain explorer. So whilst our site makes that data available through a blockchain explorer, which has a fairly simple interface, it allows anyone who has an interest in this instrument to go in and look into specific blocks. So they can verify the data. They can look into the block and see that that data is recorded. They can see the chain of custody, and they can verify for themselves through this interface that that data is not just sort of a cell in our website, but rather it exists on a block in a blockchain. And I'll just close with this. Stay tuned. Given we're putting climate instruments on digital rails, makes it quite seamless to integrate these into a wider, very tech-enabled platforms such as e-commerce, EV charging, other ride sharing, and other mass consumer platforms. Once you sort of tap into those markets, it really allows the finance to flow and allows you to amplify, in this case, climate action. So we're excited about that, and really, really honored to be here with you guys. So thanks, that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you for sharing. You have such a deep expertise in traditional climate markets, and seeing you apply that expertise now with the new technology rails that are available. I think you guys are building some really exciting stuff, and hope to see a lot of that enter our daily lives in the near future as well. So transitioning a bit into the third section of our overall climate discussion, we have two people sharing two different perspectives from their work that's been in the NGO, in the government, and in the community space. So first up, we have Miro, who is calling in from Europe, and he has founded an NGO that's worked very closely with the UNFCCC over many years, and has facilitated a lot of learning and educational experiences for stakeholders. So really honored to have you here, Miro, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Max. It's a pleasure being with you here on this call and on this panel about climate action. It's really the most important challenge of our time, and digital innovation is really a big enabler of action and can help us really addressing this challenge appropriately. I'm delighted to follow on the presentation of Bill, who already indicated how there are great potentials for climate markets, for environmental financial products, and that based on blockchain technology, there can be new solutions be developed and really then used also climate impact data to get the whole of society engaged in these incentive mechanisms for climate action. So I'm with the International Association for the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges. It's a civil society organization, an entrepreneurial civil society organization based in Austria. And we are accredited to the United Nations through the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC in New York, and also the UNFCCC process. It's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. These are these big annual climate change conferences. And our aim is to develop new conceptual frameworks, but also the digital tools and the cultural shift towards getting everybody engaged in climate action. And we have three pillars. One is culture, one is technology, and one is organization. And as regards technology, we have really understood or recognized in the year 2016 that blockchain technology is the technology that really makes so many innovations possible, or the social innovations empowered by digital innovation. And so we have partnered then with leaders from Switzerland and also with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Secretariat in Bonn. And based on this, we have become also a founding member of the Climate Chain Coalition in December 2017. The Climate Change Coalition is the leading network of experts and institutions, academics, solutions providers, and governance experts to look how to harness the potentials of blockchain technology for climate action. And I'm in this Climate Change Coalition, the team leader for events and communication, and also the EU team leader. And with this Climate Change Coalition, we have set up at the last climate change conference COP25 in Madrid last December, the digital innovation community within the UNFCCC process. And there we have identified two flagship initiatives. One is the data and digital innovation infrastructure for multi-stakeholder climate action coordination and incentivization. And the other one is a digital pavilion, which should bring to this UNFCCC process this digital innovation, educate people, and provide new forms of participation. And this D2I2 initiative, Data and Digital Innovation Infrastructure, is a multi-stakeholder collaboration of policymakers, digital innovation community, and resource holders towards the development of a comprehensive global data and digital innovation infrastructure, a digital climate action business and public service ecosystem in support of multi-stakeholder engagement in the implementation of the European Green Deal and the Paris Agreement. Because we have the different stakeholders that are coming together within our digital innovation community, they highlight that there is a need for systemic approaches and for multi-stakeholder coordination, even if there are platforms like the All Infra Climate with good solutions, or we have also Climate Trade as one of our partners. But in general, the problem is that this needs to have solid standards that are really globally recognized. Then there need to be global accounting systems and reporting mechanisms that are recognized everywhere. And it needs also to be connected with the public sector. And as my focus here is also on somehow connecting with European perspective, some information about what the European Union is doing in the field of somehow using blockchain technology for European policy goals and stronger cooperation in the Union. So there's the member states, 27 member states now, as UK has left, they have formed a European blockchain partnership where the representatives of ministries are informing one another about their blockchain policies, and they are developing a European blockchain services infrastructure, because there are certain public services, blockchain-based public services related to identity, notarization, and other things, which are all the same needs in all countries. But in order to function in a cross-border perspective, there needs to be standardization and data exchange protocols, data architecture, and these kind of things. The European Blockchain Services Infrastructure is the initiative, and for research in the field of blockchain is the European Observatory and Forum. And with our Climate Change Coalition and the Digital Innovation Community, we have said, as the European Union has now adopted the European Green Deal as an ambitious, bold commitment to become climate neutral by 2050 and really align all policies, the internal market, the internal capital market, everything. There needs to be information system. There need to be data collection and reporting and certification of action and impact, and to create the right incentive mechanisms and taxation mechanisms. So we said, if Europe needs for the European Green Deal this blockchain services infrastructure, then let's see how this effort can be used for global community, that there would be for the Paris Agreement implementation, because there are very similar goals and the same technology policy challenges and also other regulatory challenges. And so we are working and discussing with European Commission, with the DG Connect there, and other players, also with the UNFCCC, how can there be developed a global blockchain services infrastructure, and also with this D2I2 as a guiding framework on what needs to be done in order to have a systemic solution around the whole value chain. And there's also the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications, INATBA, which is somehow also a bridge to discuss with the European Commission and other stakeholders on how to create the regulatory framework that all these solutions can function. Here we have a list of activities and leading partners for this D2I2 initiative. We have, on the one hand, a unique object identification use case proposal for EPSI and European Blockchain Services Infrastructure. We have people focusing on digital measurement, reporting and verification and smart standards. Tom Baumann here is our leader. We have very strong teams around climate finance innovation led by Alexei Shadrin, Evercity. Registration, certification and incentivization is essential, where it also comes close to what Bill has talked about, using also not only blockchain technology, but also Internet of Things and other digital innovations is very essential. And for Internet of Things, we have AIoT, the Alliance of Internet of Things Innovation, led by Tom de Block. We are connecting with the global climate action tracking and accounting systems. We are going to use these solutions for climate philanthropy innovation. And a key element also of the European Green Deal is the European Climate Pact, which wants to give an opportunity and a platform to different stakeholders to define their contributions, their avenues towards climate neutrality. And we want to develop the necessary tools to get this done. And we will innovate in terms of the digital innovation in COP26. It's, I think I will stop here for the time being in order to allow them some time for the other speakers and for discussion. But I think it's very important that we have really this multi-level governance approach and systemic approach where we bring the different stakeholders together, solution providers, regulators, consumers, that we develop the right ecosystem in which the different digital solutions will function, and we will really get all of society meaningfully and rewardingly engaged in climate action.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miro. And thank you for sharing such a great overview of your work and many of the partner works you're doing. I think for us all in climate, we see Europe as the current world leader in both policy and also forward-thinking, corporate proactiveness. So I think there's a lot more we can learn from you, and also hopefully chances to interact with your organization in the near future as well.
Would be delighted.
So last but not least, our final speaker is Ojas, who is joining us from Bangalore, and she has been, doing a lot of work with the Indian government in both technology and also policy formation, and currently is at Mindtree, a very substantial technology development company, where she will share some of the work she's been doing to build resilient communities for the people responding to climate change. Thank you, Ojas.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Max. Thank you for inviting me to this very special panel. As a social development consultant, I have worked extensively in creating and implementing digital platforms that empower and build resilience in underprivileged and underserved communities of our societies, so that they are better able to respond to the negative impacts of climate change and the loss of biodiversity. So In my talk, I will be establishing why this particular topic is of so much importance to developing countries like India. Um, I hope you can see my screen.
Not yet. I think you have to share screen using the middle arrow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to be logging in again. I'm sorry. Hello?
Hi, we're still here.
Yeah. So I hope you can see my screen now.
We're still looking at video. Are you using the share screen function from Zoom? Okay, here we go. We see this.
Right. So
Perfect.
while I think in this panel it is very well established that climate change is here already, and that climate calamities are going to make world's poorest even poorer, and all of humanity is vulnerable to these natural hazards in the coming times. We need to keep in mind that these are that we're not equally impacted by the climate calamities. There are some populations that are way more vulnerable than the others. The big question is that who are these vulnerable populations? These are people, these are human, this is the human capital that is safeguarding and nurturing fragile ecosystems on which human existence is hinged upon. So, for example, forest rights. They are the guardians and the nurturers of the forest reserves, the limited forest reserves that we have got now on our planet. And they play a very crucial role in preventing forest fires, which eventually lead to greater rises in temperature. For another section of society, we are talking about small landholding farmers who constitute the majority of farming population in the world, and they are responsible for bringing us constant supplies of reliable and nutritious food. Another section is that of waste pickers, right, who are the frontline drivers of circular economy. So we're looking at, and I'd like to bring in some statistics from India. For example, 55% of the tribal population is already outside of their traditional forested habitats and have resorted to some other work in cities. When we talk of farming communities, almost 50% of India's population is engaged in agriculture, directly or indirectly, and only 15% of this sector contributes to India's GDP, which pretty much portrays the sorry state or the impoverished state in which the sector is, and therefore the people involved in are. About 4 million waste pickers constitute the informal waste sector of India and contribute to almost all the recycling happening in the country. And yet they earn less than 1.5 USD per day, which is the worst that can happen. So what is it that really makes them vulnerable in the context of climate change? It's not really the extreme weather events that are merely they're just natural hazards. They turn into disasters when populations are unable to prepare to face the hazard, to withstand the hazard, and maybe the infrastructure and the environment in which they're living in is unable to withstand the hazard. And most importantly, when they're unable to recover and adapt to the new realities posed by the crises. And that answers the question that we asked earlier as to what is it that is really making them vulnerable in the context of climate change. It is the inability to recover and adapt. And looking at climate resilience as a subject, it falls under the intersection of mitigation measures and adaptation measures. And unfortunately, somewhere I feel that the global discourse is weighed on more either on mitigation side or the adaptation side, but we're not looking at the intersection, which has the potential to include the benefits of mitigation, include business models that bring in mitigation measures, at the same time prepare local communities for greater adaptation of the problems that climate change impact is going to bring in. And here I'd like to call out that it's really unfortunate that even climate finance doesn't look at climate resilience as much as it should. There are some, on the brighter note, there are some interesting emerging trends in this subject, in the resilience subject that have been acted upon through policy and philanthropic action. And I'll just give you a few examples from India. Green innovative businesses at grassroots are emerging at a faster pace than ever before. They are usually they are owned by marginalized sections of the society and have profits well distributed. So there are different mechanisms by which the communities are able to own these businesses and function through the entire value chain. These businesses they're usually initiated by philanthropic capital, and they're supported through various state policy measures. So, for example, I just give you a few examples. Eco-friendly clay products as alternatives to refrigerators and plastic tableware. There are plenty of brands that are made out of climate resilient crops for urban consumption. And then there are sustainably produced apparel labels. And all of this is a combination of sustainability, mitigation measures, and bringing in and making sure that there is greater participation and benefit to the last mile or the vulnerable communities who are there on the ground. The other trend that one can see, and this is a top-down trend, which is that of building resilience measures in smallholder farmers, where and I think that while there are several policy measures in this direction, one can categorize them into 4 different verticals. Enhancing climate resilient food systems through transition to drought resistant and indigenous varieties of crops. Natural farming, agroforestry, multi and intercropping is one bracket of enhancing climate resilient food systems. The other is the bracket of helping or enhancing economic prosperity in the farming community itself. And this is done through the diversification of farm portfolio to include perennials, helping the farmers move up the value chain, diversifying into other non-farm activities so that they're not just dependent on farming. We need to remember that it's only when these communities are protected and empowered that we will be getting sustained supplies of reliable and nutritious food. And we're talking about a global population of more than 7 billion in no time, and so on and so forth. So we're looking at economic prosperity. There have been several measures in the area of improving health and nourishment, and most importantly, bringing in voices of these communities to the mainstream. Because what happens is that policies otherwise are just bereft of what is the reality on ground, And therefore, a lot of media houses have come forward that are dedicated to covering stories that are that cover stories from the ground up. Another trend, I think this is the most interesting trend according to me, is the emergence of open digital platforms to scale the efforts that I spoke about in the previous two slides. A lot of open source and interoperable digital platforms have come forward with the objective to increase shareability and repurposing of digital assets such as code, APIs, data aggregates, and even data-led insights to help innovators, to help businesses, to help even the state to build beyond and not waste resources in replicating solutions again. And this is a phenomena which has driven various benefits. The most important being of obviously the acceleration of a culture of open innovation in ESG and the development sector. The other is, it has drastically eliminated the need for big capital to come in to create digital solutions from scratch. It has facilitated greater collaboration and co-creation through interoperability designed into the system. And obviously, there are ways in which these platforms are able to continue the development efforts even after the funding of development program funding is exhausted or withdrawn. And most importantly, of course, it also provides a faster and a reliable access to market opportunities for the marginalized. So in the interest of time, I think I just stop here because it's time, but I would invite anyone who's interested in talking about or knowing more about open digital platforms to reach out to me, because I have been pretty much at the heart of developing one of such open digital platform in the last 5 years. Yes, so over to you, Max. Thank you.
Thank you, Ojas. And I think, it's a perfect way to end this session today, because as we've talked about, the business side and also the technology side, thinking about the human side, I think reminds us of the entire reason why we're working on these problems, right? That there's actually millions of people out there whose lives are actually being impacted by climate change. And it's really for them and for all of us that we're sort of creating these efforts. So in the interest of time, we have to conclude here. I just want to give a huge round of applause to our very talented panelists. Thank you so much. And if you guys turn on your videos, I'm just going to take a screenshot for us here. And before we officially hop off and give the stage to the next set of speakers, maybe we can just go through and have, in the order you spoke on, have each of you say one sentence that you want to conclude your particular feelings on climate change and its impacts on. So starting with Ziwei.
Yeah, I think this panel is just really important to remind us that each of us has a role, have a role to play, whether as investor, as company, as consumer. Yeah, so thank you. It has been a pleasure sharing this panel with you all.
Thank you. Evgeny?
Yeah, my point is that we have to elaborate common understanding and common alignment to 17 SDGs. And it doesn't matter whether you work at NGO, corporate, or you're in any field. We have to have like a clear understanding that it is important and it should be shared by everybody anywhere. So it's only this way we can achieve the main goal and achieve goals in the 2030 agenda. Yeah, that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Desmond?
Very simply, change or die. So, yep.
Yeah, thank you. Andy?
Yeah, I think, we have all talents, we're all here, but it's all about taking action and coming together, work together. And so, there's no competition. We are all doing good things. So take action and, connect and collaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, the opportunity to amplify climate action right now using tech is extraordinary. So let's collaborate. Excited about it.
Thank you, Miro.
Everybody needs to take action, and we need to develop systems that give the outcomes of this action value, and to develop the right incentive mechanisms, and digital innovation, blockchain technology will help.
Thank you, Ojas.